On our wedding night, she was already sitting at the head of the bed, unhurriedly removing the earring from her ear. "Hubby, do you still remember back in 3rd grade? When you played the hero and saved a damsel in distress?" I slapped my thigh hard. "How could you know about that?" "Wait, don't tell me. You were that little girl who got bullied back then?" "No," she said, the corners of her lips curving into a faint smile. Her slender fingers settled on my tie, slowly winding it around them, loop by loop. "I was the person you pinned to the ground and punched 3 times. The smile vanished from my face. 6 years of dating, an 8-figure wedding gift, and a grand wedding ceremony. From beginning to end, it had all been a trap she carefully laid for me. Now, take a guess. Is this bedroom door locked?" Inside the presidential suite, the curtains were drawn tight. Fiery red petals were scattered across the floor, and the air was rich with the sweet scent of champagne. And the air was thick with the rich, sweet scent of champagne. I sat on the edge of the bed, my tie pulled loose and hanging messily. My mind kept replaying the moment during the wedding when she said, "Yeah, I do. Luke, the smartest thing you've ever done in your life was marrying Chloe." She stepped slowly out of the bathroom, wearing a silk nightgown, her long hair loosely pinned at the back of her head. Glistening drops of water slid slowly down her neck, landing between her delicate collarbones. My Adam's apple bobbed unconsciously. She didn't look at me, but walked over and sat at the head of the bed, raising her hand to remove her earring. Her movements were gentle and meticulous, as if she were dismantling an exquisitely delicate instrument. "Hubby." "Yeah?" I responded immediately. "Do you still remember back in 3rd grade, when you stepped up to save a girl in distress?" The question came out of nowhere. My thoughts raced furiously, as my memories instantly flashed back to my childhood. Outside the elementary school gate, a little girl with a ponytail was squatting on the ground, sobbing in a low voice. Standing beside her was a girl who was half a head taller, her face fierce and overbearing. Back then, without a second thought, I rushed forward and threw 3 punches right away. Back in the day, I was a total young warrior standing up for justice. Of course I remember. I slapped my leg hard. That little girl who was getting bullied? Wait, I turned to look at her. She was also looking at me quietly, her eyes curving into crescent shapes, a faint smile lingering on her lips. Breathtakingly beautiful. "Could you be that girl? So you came all this way specifically to repay the favor?" Could this be the legendary? "No," she softly interrupted my words, the tips of her fingers wrapping my tie loop after loop. Her grip was neither too loose nor too tight, just firm enough to graze my collarbone. "I was the person you pinned to the ground and punched 3 times. The room fell deathly silent. The sweet floral scent from moments ago suddenly seemed to carry a dangerous edge. "What did you say?" "Luke," she said, enunciating my full name. "The person you mistook for a school bully back then was me." My mind went completely blank. Past memories kept flashing through my brain. The face of the boy I pushed to the ground back then. Neat short hair, a fierce and rebellious look in her eyes, glaring at me furiously even after falling into a mud pit. I tried desperately to merge that childish face with the stunningly beautiful face right in front of me, but the curve of her lips now, yet the slight curl at the corner of her lips right now, was identical to the way she gnashed her teeth in anger back then. Exactly. "When we met during freshman year, you thought it was fate." She tilted her head slightly. "In reality, I staked you out for 3 days straight, just to engineer that accidental encounter." A cold sweat broke out across my back uncontrollably. "The first movie you invited me to watch? I had already chosen the seats in advance. I knew you were afraid of the dark, yet you were too embarrassed to admit it." A chill crept up my spine and spread across my shoulders. "We dated for 6 years, and I only agreed after your 3rd proposal. It was never because I was moved by you." She slowly leaned closer, inch by inch, her face almost pressing against the tip of my nose. "It was simply because the wedding gift you offered the first 2 times didn't reach my expected target." My entire body froze in place, my breathing coming to a near standstill. She raised her hand, her fingertip lightly tapping my forehead. "Now that we've gotten our marriage license and held the wedding, and your whole family acknowledges me as their daughter-in-law." She turned her head to glance at the tightly closed bedroom door. "The door is already locked. I'm screwed. I'm afraid my wedding night is about to turn into the anniversary of my death." Chloe?" "Sure," she smiled brightly. "Sure," she said with a beaming smile, and patted the mattress. "Kneel down first." I obediently bent my knees and knelt, my knees hitting the carpet with a heavy, Muffled thud. She nodded with satisfaction, pulled a piece of paper from the nightstand drawer, unfolded it slowly, and handed it to me. 4 large words were printed at the top. DEBT, repayment list. Item 1. Mental anguish compensation for being punched 3 times. Item 2. Mud pit laundry fees, adjusted for 20 years of inflation. Item 3. Reputational damage compensation for being mocked in elementary school and suffering complete social humiliation. There were 7 or 8 more items listed below in dense detail, written in neat and elegant handwriting. You can take your time paying it back. She pressed the paper against my chest. No need to rush. We have the rest of our lives ahead of us. And plenty of time. I forced out a strained, awkward smile. Honey, you're not being serious, right? She lowered her head and pondered for a moment. Tonight, you sleep on the floor. Just the floor. No getting onto the bed tonight. As soon as the words left her mouth, she turned off the lights, pulled up the blanket, and turned her back to me, leaving me with nothing but her slender outline. I knelt in the dark quietly for a few seconds, before slowly lying down on the freezing floor. The scattered petals clung to my back, sending waves of chill straight through me. Luke, you are utterly finished. Half an hour later, a soft blanket was suddenly tossed down from the bed, landing square on my face. Don't catch a cold. Her muffled voice came through the darkness. If you get sick, how are you going to slowly pay off your debt? I clutched the blanket tightly, my nose filling with the clean scent of her usual fabric softener. What was this supposed to be? A little humanitarian mercy before my execution? The floor was as hard as an iron plate, and I tossed and turned all night without sleeping a wink. Just as dawn was breaking, a stabbing ache in my lower back forced me awake. Opening my eyes, the first thing that came into view was a pair of delicate slippers. Looking up from the slippers, Chloe had already changed into casual clothes, her long hair tied into a low ponytail, and a simple apron tied around her waist. She was holding a steaming drink. Seeing that I was awake, she set the cup down on the coffee table and turned around to head into the kitchen. I sat up and buttoned my shirt, getting a clear view of the items on the table. A cup of freshly brewed coffee sat on a saucer, accompanied by a plate of waffles drizzled with honey, and a small bowl of neatly sliced plump strawberries. I leaned in close and took a sniff. The coffee was the dark roast flavor I always drank, and the sugar level was intentionally cut in half. She actually remembered all my preferences. No, she had spent 6 whole years intentionally tracking and figuring me out, so naturally she knew every single detail. This was clearly a tactic meant to keep me under her thumb. I picked up the coffee and took a cautious sip, my eyes glued to the kitchen the entire time. Inside, she was skillfully stir-frying ingredients, the clinking of the spatula accompanied by wisps of rising cooking smoke. Right then, my phone suddenly vibrated, and a voice message from my buddy Brandon popped up. Bro, happy wedding day. How was last night? I lowered my voice and replied, Brandon, I don't think I'm going to make it through this month. What's going on? Do you remember back in 3rd grade, when I beat up a girl? The other end of the line went silent for 2 seconds. Of course I remember. That short-haired tomboy, you knocked her straight into a mud pit with 1 punch. Why bring her up all of a sudden? Chloe, was that girl? The line fell into an even longer dead silence. What did you say? Your wife? The woman everyone called the campus beauty? The one you spent 2 full years chasing before she said yes? She said our accidental encounter back in freshman year was actually something she arranged after watching me for 3 days. Brandon gasped loudly, his tone panicked. Bro, you need to run right now. I subconsciously turned my head toward the kitchen. Chloe was walking out holding a plate of fried eggs, cooked to a golden, appetizing perfection on both sides, with slightly crispy edges, exactly how I liked them. She gently placed the plate in front of me. Eat up, think of it as your last meal. She sat across from me without any expression, resting her chin on both hands, and quietly staring at me. Eat more. We have plenty of physical labor to do this afternoon. I quickly picked up a piece of waffle and stuffed it into my mouth, chewing and swallowing rapidly. Better fill my stomach first. A wise man knows when to yield. My phone was still connected to the call, with Brandon sending one voice message after another on the other end. I simply pretended not to hear it. She picked up a strawberry with her fork and popped it into her mouth, her eyes remaining fixed on my face from start to finish, never straying for a second. All right, Luke. Here are your assigned tasks for today. She pulled out her phone, opened the memo app, and slowly read the list aloud. First, replace all the light fixtures in our new home with 3000K lights. Second, assemble the brand new flower rack on the balcony. Third, go through all your college social media posts and delete every single photo you have with other girls. Fourth, give me a foot massage. That lasts no less than 40 minutes. What do these have to do with getting revenge? This is called atonement through labor. She put down her phone, her expression dead serious, as if she were presiding over an important board meeting. Back then, you hit me 3 times. I didn't retaliate on the spot. I just let the interest slowly accumulate first. I stared at her in silence. Her fingernails were trimmed round and neat, coated with a layer of almost transparent nude nail polish. I couldn't help but recall the child pulled out of the mud pit back then, glaring with fierce, stubborn eyes, dirt and mud stuffed under her nails. Deep in my heart, an indescribably complex emotion suddenly welled up. What are you dazing off for? Finish eating and get to work. She got up to clear the dishes. As she passed by me, she patted the back of my head lightly. It didn't hurt at all. Just a very light, soft touch. Fine, worst case scenario, for the rest of my life. I'll just treat it as being her free manual laborer. That afternoon, while assembling the flower rack, I kept twisting screws nonstop, until my hands were raw with blood blisters. When she walked past the balcony, her footsteps paused briefly. 5 minutes later, a box of bandages and a bottle of antiseptic quietly appeared on the coffee table. Neither of us actively brought up who had put them there. The next day, Brandon rushed over to my place in a hurry. The moment I opened the door, he poked his head in first to look around the apartment, looking like someone carefully defusing a landmine. Is my Chloe home? She's in the kitchen. He immediately reached out, grabbed my arm, pulled me into a corner of the balcony, and whispered in a low voice, "Bro, I didn't sleep a single wink last night. Whether you can sleep or not has nothing to do with me. I've been trying to remember what happened back then. Back then, you did more than punch her 3 times. Back then, you didn't just hit her 3 times. My expression froze instantly. After you shoved her into the mud, and she finally managed to climb out, you pushed her right back in. No way, bud, no way. You even pointed at her nose and shouted, called her ugly, and told her not to bully people." The air instantly fell into dead silence. Outside the balcony came the chirping of a bird, making the atmosphere feel extraordinarily awkward. The whole class saw it with their own eyes back then. She sat in that mud pit for a long time. She just sat there in the mud pit for a really long time, her eyes red, but she refused to shed a single tear. What happened afterward? She transferred to another school, and no one ever saw her again. I gripped the balcony railing, knuckles turning white from the unconscious pressure. I hadn't just hit her. I had also, right in front of the whole class, brutally humiliated her. Clear footsteps echoed from the living room. "Brandon's here?" Chloe's voice was calm and unreadable. "Make yourself at home. Grab some water from the coffee table if you want." Brandon turned around to meet his gaze, his Adam's apple bobbing awkwardly as he swallowed. During college, he had seen Chloe countless times, even at the graduation ceremony. He was the one who helped take group photos for us. Yet the way he looked at Chloe right now was like looking at a complete stranger. Hello Chloe, Ansax." Chloe gave a faint nod in response, sat straight down on the sofa, crossed her legs, and casually scrolled through her phone, exuding a powerful and icy presence. Brandon sat opposite him, barely daring to let his body touch the sofa, repeatedly signaling me with his eyes. I pretended not to notice at all. "Brandon," Chloe suddenly spoke up, her eyes still glued to her phone screen. "You were there that day too, weren't you?" Brandon's face instantly drained of color. "I was just watching off to the side. I didn't join in. I remember you were even cheering on the side back then, shouting to beat her up harder." Brandon's body trembled with fear, almost sliding right off the sofa. "I won't pursue the accomplice any further." Chloe casually flipped a page on her phone. "You just need to write a 300-word written reflection on the whole incident back then, and hand it to me next week." "Sister-in-law, are you being serious?" She raised her eyes and gave him a cool glance. Brandon immediately straightened his posture. "Serious. I will absolutely take it seriously. I'll write it right away when I get back." I sat off to the side, holding a mouthful of water that I didn't even dare to swallow down. When Brandon left, I walked him to the elevator. He looked like all his energy had been drained, leaning against the wall and panting heavily. "Bro, to be completely honest with you, don't you think Chloe treats you a little too well?" I couldn't help but freeze for a moment. Just now when I was sitting in the living room, the water on the coffee table was at the perfect temperature, and the cup was the exact one I used last time I visited. He paused slightly. Also, earlier when you lowered your head to drink water and weren't paying attention, I happened to catch the way Chloe looked at you. What kind of look? He scratched his head, as if deliberating the right wording. It didn't look anything like the way someone looks at an enemy. The elevator slowly arrived. Brandon stepped inside. Right before the elevator doors closed, he stuck his head out and urged, "Bro, don't just focus on being scared. Pay attention and really look at her." I stood at the elevator entrance, watching the floor numbers continuously jump, my mind filled with countless thoughts. Returning home, Chloe was on the balcony taking care of the plants. On the flower rack I had newly assembled, a variety of small potted plants were arranged, all of which were her favorite succulents. "Chloe, don't call me that so affectionately. Call me Ms. Chloe. Ms. Chloe, what would you like to eat tonight?" Her watering movement paused slightly, but she didn't turn around. "What can you make?" "Honestly, all I know how to make is instant noodles." "Then let's have instant noodles." Half an hour later, I carried 2 bowls of instant noodles to the dining table. She looked down, the corner of her mouth twitching slightly, yet she still sat down quietly, picked up her chopsticks, and picked all the ham sausages from her bowl into mine. "Do you not like them?" "I just think your slicing looks too ugly." I looked down at the neatly arranged ham sausages in my bowl. Every slice was cut into uniform thickness, neat and nice-looking. If she clearly claimed it was ugly, why did she give every piece to me? As this so-called revenge entered its second week, I gradually figured out Chloe's pattern of doing things. Her punishments for me were roughly divided into 3 tiers. Tier 1, errands and small tasks. Even on rainy days, she would make me cross 8 streets to buy her favorite cake from one specific shop. It had to be strawberry millefeuille. It couldn't be swapped for strawberry mousse under any circumstances. Every time I returned soaked to the skin in a wretched state, she would take the cake box, open and inspect it, and always slice off a piece to hand to me. "You got the right one. Consider this your reward." Tier 2? Strict rules that explicitly forbade me from sitting on the sofa, forcing me to sit obediently on the floor. Yet she always had a subtle detail. Whenever I sat on the floor, she would pretend to casually kick a sofa cushion right next to me. A kick, not a gentle placement, with just the right amount of force so it landed right by my hand. Tier 3, minor physical punishments. She would always catch me off guard and give my arm a light pinch, or lightly tap my forehead with the remote control. The force was always exceptionally gentle, just like a cat extending its paws, while keeping its claws pulled back, never truly harming anyone. But what truly brought my thoughts to a complete standstill wasn't these daily details. While sorting through the monthly purchase list this afternoon, an unusual item caught my eye. It was actually a men's wristwatch, a Patek Philippe no less. I double-checked it 3 times to make sure I hadn't seen it wrong. 2 months ago, while passing a mall window, I had casually looked at this watch a few extra times. At that time, Chloe was on the phone, so I thought she hadn't noticed this watch at all. "Item 6 on the debt settlement list," she said without even raising her head. "Compensating my physical and mental toll over the past 20 years. Compensating for physical and mental toll. Yet buying me an expensive watch instead? Consider this watch a reward. Rewarding me for what? Consider it your good luck." She casually flipped a page of her magazine. "That you get to be the target of my settling past scores." I held the elegant watch box. I turned it over in my hands for a long time. If this way of doing things counted as revenge, then I would actually hope this grudge could accompany us for the rest of our lives. After nightfall, while I was washing the dishes in the kitchen knife accidentally slipped, the blade grazed my fingertip, and tiny beads of blood immediately oozed out. The wound wasn't too deep, but the stinging pain was exceptionally clear. I gasped, hurriedly turning on the faucet to rinse the wound. Sudden, hurried footsteps sounded behind me. Chloe rushed into the kitchen from the living room, reaching out to tightly grasp my hand, and leaning over to inspect the injury. Her fingertips couldn't stop trembling slightly. "I always tell you to be careful with sharp tools." Her tone changed abruptly, and her words came to a sudden halt. She raised her eyes to look at me, a complex swirl of emotions in her gaze. A moment later, she took a deep breath to steady her mind, and directly put my injured finger between her lips. A faint metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. She frowned slightly. using the tip of her tongue to gently press against the wound. I froze on the spot instantly, my heart tightening abruptly. After a few seconds, she let go of my hand and hurriedly pulled open a drawer to look for a Band-Aid, bumping against the drawer edge twice in her panic. Once the protective bandage was properly applied, her trembling hands gradually stabilized. She lowered her head, carefully pressing the edges to ensure a firm fit. Always so careless in everything you do. Her voice was faint and gentle. With that, she turned around and left, her pace much slower than when she had rushed over earlier. Leaning against the counter, I raised my injured finger. It felt as though the pure warmth of her lips still lingered on the tip. Was Chloe's relentless revenge truly driven by hatred, or was there another feeling hidden beneath it? On Saturday evening, the Luke family held a family dinner. My mother emphasized over the phone that this banquet was specifically to welcome Chloe. Ever since our marriage, my mother would bring up her daughter-in-law several times a day, while rarely mentioning me at all. The car pulled up in front of the ancestral house. Chloe faced the small mirror on the sun visor, carefully touching up her lipstick. I turned my head to look at her while holding the steering wheel. When we go inside in a bit, you won't tell my parents about what happened in the past, right? She put away her lipstick, a gentle, sweet smile gracing her face. Her dignified and elegant appearance, a stark contrast to her usual demeanor toward me. What do you think? I grumbled secretly in my heart. She had always been unpredictable, capable of doing just about anything. As we stepped into the house, my mother immediately pulled Chloe enthusiastically to sit on the sofa, busy serving tea and snacks, attending to her with utmost devotion. I stood off to the side all alone, looking completely out of place. Chloe, you look quite a bit thinner, my mother said, lightly squeezing her wrist with a face full of heartache. Is Luke not being thoughtful and attentive enough to you on normal days? Mom, he treats me very well, Chloe replied softly. I forced a bitter smile to myself. Just yesterday she had ordered me to kneel on a washboard to repent. If she ever dares to mistreat you, just tell me. I'll definitely teach her a good lesson. He won't. Chloe lowered her eyes slightly, her eyelashes fluttering gently. He always gives in to me. Hearing these words made my whole body feel uneasy. My father called me into the study. After I sat down, he poured a cup of green tea and pushed it in front of me. Manage your married life well from now on. Dad, I know what I'm doing. Chloe is a composed and reliable girl, my father said with an exceptionally serious expression. From the way she looks at you, I can see a deep affection she keeps hidden. What kind of look? She may constantly find fault with you, but her eyes follow your every move, never willing to look away for even a moment. I held my teacup, remaining silent. During dinner, my mother pulled out a yellowed old photo album, insisting on showing my childhood photos to Chloe. Look at this one. 3rd grade school commendation assembly. Luke stood on stage to accept an award for performing a courageous deed. The chopsticks in my hand abruptly stopped, and Chloe also froze in her tracks. The boy in the photo was wearing a school uniform, a bright red flower pinned to her chest, grinning wide with 2 front teeth missing. Back then, he stood up at the school gate to help someone, chasing away those troublemakers, and even received a public commendation from the entire school. My mother's voice was full of pride. The corner of Chloe's mouth twitched slightly, a subtle change in expression that only I could notice. Under the table, she quietly pinched my thigh hard. I nearly spat out the rib in my mouth. Mom, there's no need to flip through these old photos anymore, I said, forcing a strained smile. These are all praiseworthy stories from the past, just in time for Chloe to take a look too. It really is quite remarkable. Chloe's voice was sweet, gentle, and refined. She turned her head to look at me, her eyes curving into crescent shapes, her lips opening and closing slightly, to silently mouth the words, I'll settle the score with you properly when we get back. I swallowed my food with great difficulty, nearly choking on it. When the banquet ended, my mother accompanied Chloe out to the courtyard for a walk. I stayed in the living room to clear the dishes. Looking out through the glass window, the two were strolling side by side, under the rose trellis. A relaxed smile hung on Chloe's face. Neither the teasing expression she wore around me, nor her distant demeanor toward outsiders. It was as if she had let down all her guard, with a touch of childlike innocence. My mother whispered close to her ear. In casual conversation, she bowed her head slightly, the back of her hand lightly rubbing her nose. At this moment, she looked like someone who had long been deprived of family warmth, and was finally wrapped in tenderness. My grip on the edge of the serving tray tightened unconsciously. Chloe, you went through so much trouble to get close to me. What on earth are you truly longing for? When Monday's management meeting ended, the vice president stopped me in the hallway. Mr. Luke, regarding the River City acquisition, the partners suddenly dropped their original negotiation conditions. We were at a standstill for 2 whole months. How could they suddenly let it go? This matter is indeed strange. The vice president adjusted his glasses. Their legal team claimed an internal change occurred, without elaborating on the reason. Returning to my office to review the relevant files, the rival in this negotiation primarily operated in real estate, backed by a force that couldn't be underestimated. For 2 months, they had coveted the development rights to the commercial land under my name, resorting to underhanded tactics like applying pressure, sending legal letters, preemptively registering trademarks, and secretly interfering with the approval process. Yet now, they suddenly backed off and gave up the fight. I immediately summoned the head of legal affairs. His words were filled with hesitation. Mr. Luke, we scouted out a bit of news. It seems a powerful party intervened before us. Did you find out who stepped in? We can't confirm for now, but right before they withdrew, they received a letter signed by Lumen Capital. Lumen Capital was the investment firm Chloe founded. He had started his own business in his junior year of college, starting with just $120,000 in seed capital, growing the company's valuation to over $100 million. On normal days, I rarely inquired about his work, and he never brought it up on his own either. What were the exact contents of that letter? The legal head shook his head lightly. The other side kept their lips sealed tight, only stating that they would no longer pursue this matter. I leaned back in my office chair, staring blankly at the ceiling for a long time. Returning home in the evening, Chloe was sitting on the sofa, flipping through a thick industry analysis report. I hung up my coat and sat down across from her. The River City M&A project. You were the one who stepped in, right? Her movement of turning the pages didn't pause for a single second. I have no idea what you're talking about. Chloe. She then slowly raised her eyes. I don't understand what you mean. Lumen Capital couldn't just be a coincidence. Her fingertips paused at the edge of the page for a brief instant, then immediately continued flipping through the content. It's purely a stroke of luck. They pressed us relentlessly for 2 months, yet one letter from you made them give up the fight. How could that be a coincidence? Chloe closed the report and tossed it onto the coffee table, leaning back against the sofa, with her arms crossed over her chest. Luke, get this straight. Listen carefully, you're under my protection. My heart skipped a beat instantly. You're also the person I came to collect past debts from. She raised her chin slightly, her expression cold and aloof. Aside from me, no one else is allowed to bully you. The room fell dead silent, save for the ticking of the clock on the wall. She got up and passed by my side, picking up the report and lightly tapping my forehead with it. Stop letting others make life difficult for you, and making me lose face. Her footsteps gradually faded away, finally disappearing behind the bedroom door. I sat alone in the living room for a long time, waves of warmth surging in my chest, giving rise to feelings I had never experienced before. Chloe's way of seeking revenge was truly impossible to fathom. Brandon sent a message inviting me out to meet. Inside a private room at the coffee shop, sitting across from Brandon was a woman in her early 30s, wearing a navy blue coat, her aura composed and graceful. The woman introduced herself as Violet. This name rang no bells for me at all, until Brandon uttered just a few short words, causing my thoughts to instantly churn. She was the very little girl who was crying at the school gate back then. You must be Luke. It's been a long time. Long time no see. Violet proactively reached out her hand in greeting. I reached out to shake it, my palm already soaked in cold sweat. Ms. Violet, about what happened back then, did you always believe? Did you think Chloe had been bullying me? She gave a faint smile. I nodded lightly, yet she slowly shook her head in denial. That day, my kitten climbed into the tree by the school gate and refused to come down for the longest time. Out of anxiety, I couldn't help but burst into tears. She gently stirred the coffee in her cup. Chloe happened to walk past and climbed the tree without a word to help me rescue the cat. Holding the kitten, she made her way down to a lower branch, and I was afraid she might lose her footing and get hurt. So, I called out for her to be careful. My hands clenched tightly beneath the table. Right at that moment, you rushed onto the scene. Violet looked at me with a calm expression. You only saw me crying, and saw her above me with a cold expression, so you assumed she was bullying me. You charged forward on the spot. By then, she had just jumped down from the tree, still holding the kitten. You marched straight up, snatched the cat away, and shoved her to the ground. She fell straight into the mud. The startled kitten took the chance to scramble away. She got up and glared at you, only for you to shove her down again. Then you punched her 3 times in a row. The heating in the shop was plenty warm, yet my whole body broke out in a cold sweat. She never fought back, Violet recounted slowly. She shielded her face with one hand and clutched the kitten with the other, refusing to let go. She was terrified it would run away and get lost again. I closed my eyes tightly. The fragmented memories of the past finally pieced completely together. There was no such thing as playing the hero back then. Instead, without even knowing the truth, I had beaten up a kind-hearted girl who was rescuing an animal. After word got out, Brandon, sitting off to the side, spoke up to ask about the aftermath. Everyone in the school heard about the incident, but the story spread that Chloe was a bully, who had been taught a lesson by a righteous boy. No one listened to her explanation, and the teacher never gave her a chance to defend herself. Unable to remain at the school, she eventually transferred. Violet picked up her backpack, preparing to leave. Before walking out, she looked back at me. Luke, after she transferred, I went to visit her. The school uniform stained with muddy water was still hanging on the balcony, unwashed. As she stared at the uniform, she said one thing to me. What did she say? That boy really hits hard. She smiled faintly, pushed open the door, and left. Inside the private room, Brandon looked at me, hesitating to speak multiple times, ultimately only letting out a sigh. Bro, though. No need to say more. I stood up, the friction between the table and floor making a harsh, scraping sound. On the drive back, I pulled the car over to the curb and turned off the engine, resting my forehead against the steering wheel, my fingers trembling uncontrollably. A wave of sour discomfort welled up in my stomach, my throat feeling as if it were being repeatedly scraped by coarse sandpaper. It turned out I was never a hero saving people. Instead, I was the wrongdoer who harmed someone for no reason. For 20 whole years, she had silently carried that injustice alone, with no one ever clearing her name. Walking through all the wind and rain along the way, she had transformed step by step into the woman she was today. Deliberately drawing near, silently investigating, attentively understanding, harboring hidden feelings. I opened my eyes abruptly, Brandon's words echoing in my mind. The way she looks at you is nothing like the way someone looks at an enemy. And what my father had said, she may pick on you constantly, but she can never take her eyes off you. The Band-Aid carefully applied back then. The coffee brewed to the exact temperature of my preference. Scene after scene kept surfacing before my eyes. The blanket that fell late that night, and those firm words that said only she was allowed to protect me. They circled repeatedly in my mind. I drove back home, my fingertips still unable to stop trembling slightly, yet my hands on the steering wheel held the direction firmly. Pushing open the door to return home, Chloe was curled up on the sofa watching television. I changed into my slippers, walked over slowly, and sat down right beside her. She turned her head and gave me a faint glance, her tone carrying a bit of teasing. Look at that terrible complexion of yours. What happened? My eyes burned with emotion. I reached out directly and took her palm into mine. Her fingertips were slightly cool. Her body subconsciously recoiled a bit. Yet in the end, she didn't pull her hand away. 10 seconds of silence flowed quietly. Luke, you're not yourself today. It's nothing. I gently flipped her hand over, laying it palm up. A faint scar lay across the center of her palm, like a thin silver line. Without looking closely, it was completely imperceptible. I understood clearly in my heart. It was the mark left when she jumped from the tree 20 years ago and gripped the rough bark. My thumb gently pressed against the scar, slowly brushing over it. Chloe's breathing suddenly lost its rhythm, and a moment later, she yanked her hand back violently. Bizarre. Her voice carried a hint of hoarseness. She stood up and walked briskly into the bedroom. The sound of the door closing was soft, yet the crisp click of the lock engaging was exceptionally clear. I sat alone in the living room, the residual warmth of her skin still lingering on my palm. Outside the window, traffic sped past, light and shadows fleetingly crossing the ceiling. The panic in my heart from earlier completely dissipated, leaving only 1,000 tumbling thoughts behind. Ever since learning the truth of the past, I began to silently put actions into practice, attentively making up for my past mistakes. No longer limiting myself to that written debt repayment list, but following my true feelings. But writing my own chapter of atonement. Every morning, I got up early, ground coffee, and placed it by her bedside. After testing and adjusting for several days, I finally figured out that 105 degrees Fahrenheit was the ideal temperature for her coffee. Drowsy from sleep, she reached out to take the cup, took a gentle sip with her eyes closed, and murmured, "Perfect temperature." I stood by the door frame, my hands unconsciously gripping the hem of my shirt tightly, temporarily suppressing the endless words in my heart. Right now was not yet the right time to confess everything. At noon, I made a special trip to the market 3 blocks away to buy ingredients. In the past, my cooking skills were crude. On normal days, I only knew how to make instant noodles to get by. After following tutorials and practicing hard for a whole week, I finally learned her childhood favorite, soy-braised eggplant. The sauce mixture leaned toward the sweeter side. The eggplant needed to be deep-fried in oil first, and right before taking it off the stove, a splash of sweet and sour vinegar was drizzled to enhance the flavor. All these flavor preferences were things I learned from Violet. Her family background was ordinary during her youth, and Chloe often ate this home-style dish alone at a small restaurant outside school. At dinner time, I brought the dish to the dining table. Chloe raised her eyes to look at it, hesitating for a long time before touching her chopsticks. "Where did you learn to make this?" "I learned it online." She stared at me intently for a moment, then picked up a piece of the dish and chewed it carefully. "The texture is a bit lacking, and it's way too sweet. Next time I'll adjust the sweetness." She didn't say anything more, silently picking up food with her chopsticks repeatedly, until the plate of food was quickly eaten clean. "The taste still isn't to my liking." She put down her bowl and chopsticks, feigning indifference in her expression. "I just couldn't let the ingredients go to waste, that's all." Looking at her stubborn front, I couldn't help smiling. During this past week, I had tried to open up and confess my true feelings multiple times. On Tuesday, while she was buried in work at her desk, I knocked on the door and walked in, the words already at the tip of my tongue. "Chloe, I have something I want to tell you. I'm busy with the task at hand. Go out for now." On Thursday, we were tending to the plants side by side on the balcony. The sunset softened her features, soft and touching. "Chloe, there's something I've always wanted to tell you." She bent over to trim the rose branches, scattered petals falling onto my shoulder. "Help me inspect the third shelf of the plant stand. The screws are a bit loose." On Saturday night, I plucked up my courage and sat by the bed. "I have some heartfelt words I want to talk through with you." She put down her phone and looked at me, her expression seemingly calm, yet the fingertips tightly clutching her phone had already turned white. Deep down, she was clearly hiding her nervousness. "What do you want to say?" "About what happened back in elementary school." Before I could finish my sentence, the phone alarm suddenly rang out. It was precisely 10:30 p.m., her fixed bedtime. She raised her hand to turn off the sound, pulled the blanket over herself, and said, "It's getting late. Let's talk tomorrow." The lights in the room went out, and darkness engulfed our surroundings. After a long while, the sound of her tossing and turning reached my ears, her breathing uneven and messy, clearly far from asleep. I knew full well in my heart that she had been deliberately avoiding the subject. Every time I attempted to touch upon the dusty past, she would subconsciously pull back and shrink away. I looked up at the ceiling, raising my hand to press the back of it against my chest. "What exactly are you afraid of?" Was she afraid I would see through the disguise and realize her revenge was only a cover for her feelings? Or was she afraid that once the truth came out, she would have no excuse left to remain by my side? A turning point arrived suddenly without any warning. On Sunday afternoon, the doorbell suddenly rang. Opening the door to look out, a girl with a hair bun stood outside, wearing an oversized hoodie, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder, and a lollipop in her mouth. She blinked brightly. "You must be Luke, right? And you are?" "I'm Jenny, Chloe's childhood best friend." The girl stepped into the house at her leisure, walking straight into the living room in her socks. Hearing the noise, Chloe poked her head out from the kitchen. The moment she saw who it was, her expression shifted instantly, revealing a rare hint of fluster. "Why did you come over all of a sudden?" "I was thinking about you, so I made a special trip to see you, and to help screen her for you while I'm at it." Jenny plopped right down on the sofa. She looked even more striking in person than in the photos. She actually looks even more handsome in person than in the photos. "Photos? What photos?" Chloe walked briskly over to her best friend's side, quietly nudging her with her elbow. As a signal, But Jenny either failed to catch the hint, or intentionally ignored it. Speaking of directly, didn't you say before that she looked better in person than in the photo album? Jenny, Chloe's tone darkened slightly. Fine, I won't say another word. Jenny raised her hands in surrender, turning to give me a playful smile. I poured tea and sat down, while the three of us chatted casually. Jenny had a cheerful and outgoing personality, her topics jumping all over the place, ranging from daily work to watching TV shows, the atmosphere feeling relaxed and breezy. Throughout the entire process, Chloe only focused on her best friend's words, her expression tense, deeply terrified she might casually blurt out her hidden feelings. While I appeared to be looking down and fiddling with my phone, I was actually listening intently to their conversation. After chatting for a long time, Jenny took a sip of tea, and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. In the blink of an eye, you two are already married. Time really flies. If you count from middle school, these feelings actually began way back then. The fingers Chloe held the water cup with suddenly tightened. What do you mean by that? I mean, ever since middle school Jenny. Chloe hurriedly stood up to stop her. Yet it was still a step too late. Her remaining words came tumbling out. You've been in love with him since middle school. The living room fell into dead silence in an instant, and even the chirping of birds outside quietly ceased. I slowly raised my eyes, only to see Chloe standing frozen beside the sofa, holding the water cup in a vice grip, her fingernails digging into her palm. There was no anger on her face now. Only panic she couldn't hide. A state like this was something I had only seen once before, when I accidentally cut my finger. Back in middle school, my tone was gentle and low. She deliberately avoided my gaze. She's just talking nonsense. I am not talking nonsense. Jenny widened her eyes in rebuttal. Back in 8th grade, I saw with my own eyes at my house. You were looking through his class photo. Chloe immediately reached out to cover her best friend's mouth. Yet Jenny still tried her best to make a sound, her muffled words coming through intermittently. You even secretly kissed that photo. The air completely froze. Chloe's ears rapidly turned a deep, fiery red, the flush spreading all the way down her neck, making even her delicate collarbones take on a rosy hue. In all our 6 years together, I had never seen her look so bashful and flustered before. Luke, her voice trembled slightly. Just pretend you didn't hear what she just said. Pretend I didn't hear anything? She hurriedly dragged Jenny and dashed into the bedroom, and slammed the door behind them, making even the walls shake slightly. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the sloshing water inside the cup, my surging emotions unable to settle for a long time. Her feelings had taken root as early as middle school, the year she had been in love with me. Were a whole 6 years earlier than our chance encounter in college, far exceeding the time when she allegedly staked me out for that encounter. Half an hour later, Jenny was shown out of the bedroom by Chloe. Jenny silently mouthed to me, making it clear that the truth was out. Upon parting, Jenny suddenly stopped in her tracks, lowering her voice as she warned me. She hasn't had an easy life all these years. Her playful expression from earlier completely faded, replaced by a serious and earnest face. She spent years becoming the woman she is today. Do you really think all of it was only for revenge? Without waiting for my answer, Jenny turned and walked away. I closed the front door, leaning my back against the wall and looking up at the ceiling. Everyone assumed she was driven by hatred and revenge. Perhaps even she once believed that. But the love hidden in her heart had been predestined from the very beginning. That night, Chloe stayed in the bedroom the entire time, never taking a single step out of the room. I sat quietly in the living room for a long time. Near 11 that night, I remembered her mentioning earlier that her hand cream was out of stock. I decided to go online to help her search for a supplier. The desk in the study was tidied up neat and clean, with industry books and files arranged neatly. Tucked into the side of the document rack was an old dark blue notebook, the cover's edges worn and yellowed with age. I hadn't intended to touch or move the documents, but while doing so, the notebook accidentally slipped out, falling open on the floor. The familiar handwriting on the page caught my eye. The script was unique, with the ending strokes carrying a slight curve. I recognized it at once as Chloe's handwriting. I bent down to pick it up, my eyes landing first on the opening words, regarding Luke. Reason reminded me that I shouldn't snoop, yet a trace of curiosity kept my eyes fixed involuntarily on the written words on the paper, silently flipping through page after page. 8th grade autumn entry. Today at Violet's home, I saw his photo. the reckless boy who hit and injured me back then, has grown taller and broader, and his baby teeth have all been replaced. I wonder if his punches are still as hard as they were back then. Ninth grade. Heard by chance that he competed in the school sports day. Violet sent a video from the scene. He tripped during the 100-meter dash, clumsy but unhurt. Yet he didn't give up. He got right up, sprinted with all his might, and ended up taking third place. He really is stubborn as a mule. 10th grade entry. Made up my mind to apply to the university in the same city as him. Unwilling to admit the real reason out loud, I claimed it was because the local universities had great resources. Yet deep down, I knew clearly that going so far away was all to follow in his footsteps. Freshman year. Our reunion at the library. I pretended to flip through a book to hide my nervousness. He sat quietly by the window, reading. The moment he raised his eyes, met mine, and smiled, my heart rate instantly went out of control. Chloe, you couldn't escape falling for him after all. Sophomore year date. He took the initiative to invite me to a movie, thinking our meeting was all fate. The seats for the movie were actually a prime spot I selected in advance. Knowing he was afraid of the dark, he would always prefer a seat near the aisle. Sitting side by side, our elbows accidentally brushed together. Flustered, I nearly knocked over the snacks. Aside from the embarrassment, my heart was filled with joy. Proposal journal entry. Faced his third proposal today. Declining the first 2 times on purpose. Had nothing to do with the size of the wedding gift. I just hadn't plucked up the courage to lay bare the truth of the past. Seeing him kneel on one knee with such an earnest look, declaring he would wait all night if he didn't get an answer. I finally nodded yes. The moment we embraced, tears fell uncontrollably. I once thought our paths would never cross again in this lifetime. Yet fate went in circles only to tie us tightly together. The girl he once punched had willingly given him her whole heart. In this game, I have completely lost. Eve of the wedding entry. Tomorrow is our wedding day. After thinking it over for a long time, I've decided to tell him all about the past. I've repeatedly imagined all kinds of scenarios after the truth is revealed, fearing he might feel terrified. I'd use punishment as a guise to stay together. Fearing he'd be overwhelmed with guilt, I'd use the rest of my life to make up for what's owed. The only thing I fear most is that after learning everything, he might resolutely turn around and leave. The pen had pressed so hard it tore through the paper. Again and again, she had reassured herself that I would never leave. The final lines were messy and blurred, the paper stiff where tears had soaked into it. I slowly closed the notebook. Clutching the cover so tightly my knuckles turned white. My vision gradually blurred behind a veil of mist, a sour ache welling up in my nose, a choking sensation stuck in my throat, trying my best to suppress the surging emotions. Scalding tears still dripped onto the dark blue cover, spreading into tiny dark spots. Chloe, so you were the one who had been afraid all along. Ever since you innocently fell in love at the age of 13, you had spent all those years silently following and waiting. Back then, you took 3 punches for no reason, and nobody ever uttered a single apology to you. Yet you transformed that pain into a long, deep love. Relying on sheer resilience, you pulled yourself out of that muddy past, got accepted into a top university, built a company with your own hands, and transformed step by step into the dazzling person you are today. Your so-called deliberate revenge was a facade all along. You grew with all your might, just to stand rightfully by my side. Thinking back to the anxious self-questioning in your notebook, it turns out you were terrified deep down that I would walk away. I put the notebook back in its original place, wiped the tears from my face, and took several deep breaths to calm myself. I walked slowly to the bedroom door. Inside, it was quiet and silent. Instead of rashly pushing the door open, I simply rested my forehead against the cold door panel, standing quietly for a long time. Everything can wait until tomorrow, I whispered in a low voice. The next morning, I sat in the living room early, waiting. The dark blue notebook rested quietly on the coffee table, placed beside a cup of coffee at precisely 105 degrees. The bedroom door opened slowly, and Chloe walked out wearing a loose nightgown, her black hair falling casually, faint pillow marks still visible on her cheek. As her gaze swept across the table, her footsteps froze abruptly, her eyes landing first on the coffee cup. Before locking onto that familiar notebook, all the color drained from her face in an instant, and her lips lost their natural hue as well. That's right, I read it all. Her panicked eyes darted back and forth between the notebook and me. her fingers repeatedly clutching and releasing the hem of her nightgown. Those were just random thoughts I wrote down a long time ago. What you wrote the day before the wedding? I saw every word. Her breathing became rapid, her chest heaving continuously, and she subconsciously took half a step backward. I can explain everything to you. There's no need to explain. I slowly stood up, and she backed away again, her back pressing straight against the wall, with nowhere left to retreat. I took a step forward, stopping half a meter away from her. She looked up at me, glistening tears already welling up in her eyes, yet she bit her lip hard, stubbornly refusing to let the tears roll down. That stubborn look was exactly like the small figure trapped in the mud all those years ago, gradually overlapping with the woman before me. Do you remember what you wrote on page 47? Her shoulders trembled slightly. An accidental encounter inside the library. You pretended to flip through a book. I looked up and smiled softly at you. You wrote that your heart raced, and even your breathing faltered. Stop talking. And entry number 103. When I knelt down to propose, you wrote that you cried even harder than I did. Luke, stop. She couldn't help but interrupt, her tone slightly hoarse. Yet I still laid out all the heartfelt words in my mind. And on the very last page, filled with anxiety, you were terrified, trying to convince yourself I would never leave, falling drop by drop onto her lapel. She hurriedly turned her face away, wiping the tear stains from the corners of her eyes with force. You're not allowed to stare at me. Our true feelings were already crystal clear. I could no longer turn a blind eye. I reached out and gently turned her face back around. Her wet eyelashes trembled slightly. The tip of her nose flushed red. A faint tooth mark left on her lower lip. Chloe, I'm here. I will never leave you. Her tears fell even more fiercely, and she choked back a sob. Back then, when you pushed me to the ground, I didn't even back down. I'm talking about me. I will never leave you. I will never abandon you. I leaned down slightly, pressing my forehead tightly against her. 6 years of living together day and night. It was never a revenge plan. The warm coffee, the carefully placed bandages, silently resolving my crises behind the scenes. Every single detail was pure sincerity. I once said that, aside from me, nobody else is allowed to push you around. I've always kept those words close to my heart. Back then, I mistakenly punched you 3 times, and even publicly hurt you with harsh words. She gave a soft hum in response. I raised my hand to hold her palm, my thumb rubbing against that scar left by time. All my past debts, I am willing to pay them back in full. In this life and the next, I'll let you vent every bit of grievance in your heart. She lowered her eyes to our joined hands, remaining silent for a long time. Then she lightly struck my chest. The first punch, the second punch, each blow softer than the last. And after the third punch landed, her hand stayed right over my heart. Her palm pressed against my chest, clearly feeling my rapid, chaotic heartbeat. The debt of those 3 punches is settled. Taking advantage of the moment, I pulled her into my arms. She buried her face against my neck, her body trembling slightly. Chloe, I love you. Ever since that soft smile we shared in the library back in freshman year, this affection took root deep in my heart. She froze for a moment, arguing in a soft voice. You were obviously the one who smiled first. And you were the one who fell first. Your hair was tucked behind your ear, holding a textbook in your hands. That subtle curve of your lips when we first met. I've remembered it all the way until today. She shyly buried her face even deeper. The tips of her ears flushed red. Why do you remember the details so clearly? Because that one look stole my heart. I've remembered it for 6 years. She stopped talking, nestling quietly in my embrace, her index finger tightly clutching my clothes. Sunlight streamed through the window and spilled across the floor, bathing the room in warm light. The light and shadows outlined a soft silhouette around her hair. I rested my chin lightly on top of her head, and closed my eyes with a sense of peace. 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. At 7:30 a.m., the alarm rang right on time. I reached out to grope for my phone by the bedside, but it was already gone. It turned out the person beside me had turned off the sound in advance. Chloe was lying on her side looking at me, her eyes half open and half closed, her hair messy and spread across the pillow. Don't move. Her voice soft and languid with sleep. What time is it now? Be good and lie down for another 5 minutes. She leaned slightly closer to me, resting her cheek against my chest, her arms wrapping around my waist. Thinking back to a few months ago, I could only sleep on the freezing floor night after night. The shifts in life are always unexpected. Where is that debt settlement list of yours? I tore it up long ago. When did that happen? The night after you finished reading my notebook. She snuggled into my chest with a muffled voice. It was only meant to let me vent a little. When you pulled it out back then, your expression was extraordinarily serious. Don't tease me, I laughed softly, my fingertips gently stroking her long hair. About the childhood misunderstanding. I never got to face it properly. A slender finger gently pressed against my lips. If you apologize again, I really will hit you. I wasn't going to apologize. I wanted to say thank you. I took her hand and intertwined our fingers. Thank you for enduring the dark past, and never giving up easily. Thank you for crossing over a decade of time, to walk step by step to my side. And thank you even more, for ultimately choosing to spend the rest of your life with me. Her clear eyes looked at me, her expression shifting slightly. Saying such sentimental words so early in the morning, they're just my honest thoughts. She raised her hand and lightly thudded my chest once, the force soft and gentle, before nestling back against me with peace of mind. In the future, don't mention those stories about playing the hero when we're outside, and don't let our elders flip through those old photo albums again either. I'll listen to whatever you say. After a moment of silence, a tiny, soft voice slowly sounded. Actually, I liked you long before that too. The words were gentle, yet they landed firmly in the deepest part of my heart. Around 9 o'clock, the two of us sat across from each other at the dining table, enjoying breakfast. A message from Brandon popped up on my phone, teasing me about whether I still slept on the floor. Looking up, Chloe was drinking from my coffee cup and stealing bacon from my plate. Noticing my gaze, she paused her movements. What are you staring at me for? Looking at my wife. The tips of her ears turned red once more, though her mouth remained as feisty as ever. Even though the list was thrown away, our daily agreements still count. Division of chores, and handing over your salary. You can't slack off on either. And when we argue, you have to take the initiative to yield. I agree to all of it. No dining out, or meeting alone with other women. No problem. Is yeses the only thing you know how to say? I only obey you. A crumpled paper ball was lightly tossed toward me. I caught it steadily, a relaxed, open smile spreading across my face. I typed a brief reply to my buddy's message. We've been sharing a bed for a long time now. Putting down the phone, the warm morning sun spilled through the window, the leaves of the green plants reflecting tiny golden glints. Chloe looked at the flower rack she had assembled with her own hands, and upon noticing my gaze, she put on a feigned, fierce look, nose secretly sneaking peeks at me. Gazing at my own lover doesn't count as sneaking peeks. The corners of my lips couldn't help but curve upward, sweetness quietly filling our everyday life together.